Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to be reviewing still Unit 9 notes, but this time we're going to be discussing area. We're going to be discussing area of quadrilaterals and triangles. So what we want to get started is the first thing we want to know about area is that area has two dimensions. It is also the inside of a figure, kind of like if you're painting a wall or putting tile on your floor. And it has two dimensions. It always has length and width. You can call it length or width, or you can call it base and height. It always has two dimensions, which is why your units are always in units squared. So if you're using feet, you'd call it area is in feet squared. If you're using centimeters, you would say area is in centimeters squared, so on and so forth. So the formulas that I'm going to use are the ones in the reference materials, the reference chart for 6th grade. We're going to go ahead and get started with square, rectangle, and parallelogram. And the reason why we put them together is because they use the exact same formula, which is area equals base times height. So we already know that a square has all equal sides. So if I said that the base was 4 centimeters for this square, then its height would also be 4 centimeters. Okay? So the formula is area equals base times height. You always want to use the formula because the formula, sometimes in our questions, they don't ask us for the answer. They'll ask us which equation matches. So naturally, your base would be 4 centimeters times your height, which is also 4 centimeters. And 4 times 4 gives you 16. So the area of this square, the inside, is 16 centimeters squared. Just like that. Okay? This rectangle, let's say that we made the base or the length 8 centimeters and we made the height 4 centimeters. Okay? Area equals base times height again, where my base would be 8 centimeters, and you can use the dot or you can use the multiplication symbol, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. 8 times 4 would give you 32. So this would be 32 centimeters squared. Okay? Now, one really important thing, so if we move on to our parallelogram, something very important that you should know is that you have to be very careful with the height. So let's say the base was 8 centimeters also. Here. A lot of people will think that this is the height right here. And even sometimes they'll put numbers right here, centimeters, and you'll think that this is the height. But just like when you go to a doctor's office, when they measure your height at the doctor's office, they don't ask you to stand slanted like this, right? They tell you to stand up straight and they measure your height. With that being said, the height is found from the highest point of a figure straight down. So it goes straight down and it makes a right angle, a 90-degree angle. It touches the base and it touches the height. Okay, so this would be your height. So this is not necessary because it's slanted. That's not how you measure height. So sometimes they'll give it to you inside, or sometimes they'll give it to you outside from the highest point straight down. So they'll go highest point like this, straight down. And this would also be the height. So let's say that our height was 4 centimeters. We'll still use the formula. Area equals base times height, where the base would be 8 centimeters. Well, you don't have to write centimeters yet. Times, that's not my height because it's slanted. This is my height, 4 centimeters. And again, 8 times 4 is 32. So my area would be 32 centimeters squared. And these are my answers. let's take a look at our triangles. Now, the formula for a triangle is, the formula in your formula chart is area equals 1/2 the base times the height, okay? But I suggest we use a simpler formula that you probably would like better. Instead of multiplying by 1/2, you can always divide by 2. So we can do area equals base times height divided by 2. You can do that as well. So mathematicians decided to find this formula in a very, very smart way. So what happened was, back then they were like, okay, we know how to find the area of squares, but how do we find area of triangles? So what they realized was, if they took a rectangle and they knew that the area was base times height, and they said, oh, look what we can do. We can get the area of a rectangle and we can divide it by 2 or take half of it, and it makes us a triangle. So that's where they got that formula from, base times height divided by 2. And they were like, well, does it work with every sort of triangle? Because I know this is a right triangle, so that'll work. And they're like, yeah, it'll work. So then they took a parallelogram and they said, will it work? So they took the base times the height and they divided it by 2, and they saw that it still made a triangle. Okay, that's where they got the formula from. So let's pretend that the base of this triangle was 4 centimeters. And the height, again, this is not the height because it's slanted. The height is found from the highest point straight down. It'll give you like a little dotted line and it makes a right angle. This is the height. I'm going to put H for height. And let's pretend that this is 6 centimeters. Okay, so we're going to use our formula. Area equals, and I'm going to use this one because it's a lot easier to use. Base times height divided by 2. Where my base is 4, my height is 6, and I'm going to divide by 2. 4 times 6 is 24. And if I divide that by 2, it gives me 12 centimeters squared. 12 centimeters squared. Same thing with this triangle. Since it's a right triangle, we already have the right angle right here. Okay. Let's say I'm going to use inches now because I've been using centimeters. Let's say the base is 3 centimeters and the height is, let's say the base is 3 inches and the height is 3 inches. Just so you can see that it's still squared units. Now I'm going to do my area. Base times height divided by 2. My base is 3. My height is 4. And I divide by 2. So 3 times 4 is 12. And 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. Since I'm in inches, 6 inches squared. That is my area. 6 inches squared. Okay. And last but not least, we have our trapezoid. Now, I only drew one trapezoid. We call this an isosceles trapezoid because it has 2 equal sides. We call that an isosceles trapezoid. And if you notice, a trapezoid has 2 bases because if you look here, this looks like a little skirt. This is the base one and this is the other base because I could also flip it around. And now it looks like a little bowl. So this is still a base and that's a base, okay? But there's another trapezoid, and it looks like this. It looks like a little kind of shoe. Something like that. And this trapezoid has a right angle right there. Okay, so the formula for a trapezoid on your formula chart says area equals 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times the height, or I'm going to offer you a different option. We can say base 1 plus base 2 times the height, and instead of multiplying by 1/2, I'm going to divide by 2. I like this one a lot better. Okay, because some of you will get scared to use the 1/2, or you change it to a decimal and you don't feel too comfortable with decimals. So that's okay. So they did this exactly the way, they found this formula exactly the way they did to triangles. They realized that if they took a rectangle and they took half of it in a certain way, that looks like a trapezoid. See that right there? Trapezoid. Or this is what they noticed, that if they took a parallelogram and they got half of it, sorry that's not so perfectly drawn, but that is a trapezoid right there. Now you're probably thinking, where does the base 1 and the base 2 come from? If you look at this, it looks like they took this trapezoid and they flipped it over and they got this one over here. So if this is base 1, then this is base 2. But if you flip it around, base 1 ends up here and base 2 ends up here. And since the formula for a rectangle is base times height, you would get these two together. You have to add them up, base times the height, and if you divide it by 2, then you get that trapezoid. Same thing over here. This is base 1 and this is base 2. If you flip it around, then this becomes base 1 and this base 2. So the formula is base times height for a parallelogram, and then if you divide by 2. So here we go. Let's use our formulas. Okay? So let's pretend that our bottom base, and whichever one you want to be base 1 or base 2, it doesn't really matter. Let's say this one is here. So now remember, this is not my height because it is slanted. The height is found from the highest point straight down. It makes a right angle. And let's say that this is, well, obviously this is the height, and let's say this was 6 centimeters. Okay? So here's our formula. I'm going to use the second formula because it's a lot easier. Remember that you have to add the bases, not multiply them. So you can decide whichever base you want to be base 1. It's up to you. I'm going to say that this is base 1. So we're going to go 5 plus 7. And then I'm going to multiply it by the height, and then I'm going to divide by 2. So, of course, you have to follow PEMDAS. Parentheses goes first. 5 plus 7 would give me 12. You could keep the parentheses because it also means to multiply. 12 times 6 gives me 72. And if you divide that by 2, it gives you 36 centimeters squared. Ta-da! Okay. Same thing for the other trapezoid. Let's pretend that this is, I'm going to use inches. 7 inches. This is 6 inches. Now, this is already the height because it's from the highest part straight down. And let's pretend that this is 3 inches. Okay. I'm going to use the easy formula. Base 1 plus base 2 times height divided by 2. So I want this one to be base 1 now. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go 7 plus 3. Multiply it by the height, which I'm going to call it 6. And divide by 2. 7 plus 3 is 10. You don't have to put parentheses if you don't want to. We use parentheses for multiplication here. You can use the dot, or you can use the regular multiplication symbol, which is a little, this one right there, okay? I decided to use the dot, just so you know that it means the same thing. So we know that 10 times 6 is 60. And when you divide that by 2, you get 30. So my area would be 30 inches squared. And that is how you find the formula, or how you use the formula for the area of a trapezoid. Okay? Have a great day. Miss you.